I'm Nell Ruby. I'm an artist, an educator, and I've spent my whole life thinking about how images work. I consider visual literacy an essential skill in the information age as we increasingly rely on images to communicate. I want to share the basic elements of visual language with you. It's my hope that you will be invigorated by what you learn and feel motivated to engage formal design for your professional pedagogical goals, as well as to inspire your personal explorations. Daily, we use our sense of sight as a primary tool to navigate a visually complex world. At a glance, the urban landscape presents a chaotic mass of signs and symbols. Variations in form emerge everywhere we look, from hairstyles to tracking paths for navigation. But you may be relieved to discover that the same 6 elements structure every image and object you can see. You may be even more surprised that you have known these familiar visual building blocks since you learned to talk. The elements of design are line, shape, value, texture, color, space, and allusion to space. These 6 descriptive nouns can fully describe everything we see, whether it's a building, a hillside, a haircut, a map, a letter form, a chair, or a football play. These elements are fundamental to how we think about what we see. The elements of art are solidly definable. You might think of them like nouns in verbal language. These visual components take on life and meaning through how they are arranged within their frame. The relationship of one element to another within a specified setting are known as the principles of design. Our experience of the principles actively informs the meaning we make of an image. Principles describe relationships, and, like all relationships, defining them can be slippery. Interpretation depends on what you emphasize. The principles describe a state of action in the bigger picture. In spoken or written language, they're more like verbs. The major principles of design are balance, contrast, hierarchy or proximity, rhythm, emphasis, and scale. You'll notice so far I have been discussing a visual experience according to its abstract form. We can think of abstract as being non-representational. The trick is, absolutely everything we see is structured with abstract form. No matter the variation of the object depicted, whether a hairstyle, a building, a landscape, or a person, everything has form. A work's formal qualities are different from its narrative qualities. But in the more successful works, the form and the content support one another. As an example, let's look at Grant Woods' iconic 1930 painting, American Gothic. There are intentional and skilled choices made in the rendering of this painting that strongly influence how we interpret it. Our first inclination is to describe by naming the things we see. Here we have a farmer and his wife in front of their house. True. But let's look further. As we deconstruct this image, the way we might diagram a sentence, we can see how the artist manipulates form to underscore his narrative idea. There is a sense of stability in the work created by the gridwork of perpendicular lines formed. Let's begin with the horizontals. From the top, our eyes follow the crown of the simplified trees in the background from the left toward the join of the horizontal bar of the window pane in the center. Below that, a strong horizontal line marks the forward-facing gaze of the farmer, 2 full circles that seem to stare at us. Under that, the contrasting edges of the gray roof and the White House create 2 more flat left-to-right lines, which enclose the parallel round eyes of the farmer's wife, whose eyes thankfully glance to the side, likely an attempt to avoid zombifying the couple. Below that, we mark points on the clothing that further repeat horizontals. The brooch punctuates the center of the bric-a-brac edges and prim white collar, stitching on the overalls. The frontality of the pitchfork is curved, but also horizontal. Finally, the pitchfork is gripped by a hand marked by rhythmic, approximate left-to-right lines indicating fingers. We can establish verticality in the same manner. The side of the house blends with the side of a neck. The repeated forms on the facing of the house. The alignment of the brooch with the center of the farmer's wife's face. The dark torsos of the two figures join together as one, only subtly differentiated by the slight vertical line defining a variation in height, continues upward to the window. The vertical tines of the pitchfork, edges of a dark coat contrasting the light blue of worn denim with a vertical central seam, the long outer edge of the farmer's face against the blue sky, and the geometry of the red barn create strong repeating vertical boards. This is a painting with no carefree frivolity. A similar gravity is emphasized when we isolate shape. The overall container is a vertical rectangle. The house in the background begins a triangle, a structure we associate with power and strength. Physically, it's known as a massive structural power. Think pyramid. Even the organic forms in this composition are grounded and solid. They occupy a large portion of the canvas and seem to become a single unit. The silhouette of the figures sits solidly across the canvas like foothills backed by the house and barn. The major shapes can be seen as a sort of mountain range. Now, let's explore color. The painting's hues are equally dour. There's very little contrast across the piece except in the few places where we are meant to focus our attention. The hues, or the names of the colors, occupy a narrow range. A hazy gray-blue sky appears once at the top of the artwork, again in the farmer's wife's eyes, and once more in the faded overalls. The green trees, red barn, and yellow brooch are the only places of true color in the entire painting, and those you would hardly call vibrant. The cumulative experience of its formal qualities leads us to a very specific reading of the artwork. Verticality suggests strength. Horizontality suggests immobility and alignment with the earth. The utter absence of any sort of diagonal or free-form line makes us understand that this is not a site of whimsy or luxury. In the solidity and ground-bound shapes and the sparse, reserved use of color, we feel the serious purpose of the subjects. We can see the narrative idea in a manner that is supported by the way in which it is painted. This is more than an image of a farmer and his wife. This is a statement. Indeed, the form of the couple melds with their home and livelihood to become part of the land and landscape. They are large in the world, but humble, as the house above them is pointing to the heavens. The window within it structured by a crossbar in the form of an adorned cross. These two are a stalwart, strong, heavy, solid, God-fearing people. The correlation of form, along with illustrated details of the farmer and his wife, pull us into this place. We experience the solemnity and weight of the farm. We don't just read the image, we feel it. We imagine this life. As it is painted in 1930, we would also consider the history of America and the plight of the farmer and the land at the beginning of the Great Depression. To contrast American Gothic, we will look at the portraits of another iconic American couple. On the left is the presidential portrait of Barack Obama, painted by Kehinde Wiley. On the right is the official portrait of the First Lady, Michelle Obama, painted by Amy Sherald. Let's overview the formal considerations of these two works to consider how they differ from the Grant Wood painting. Again, we'll look at the formal structure to see how they amplify the story being told. On the left, we see foliage. The president appears ensconced. Sometimes it overtakes him. Sometimes he's in front of it. The chair, out of context, but solid and full of gravitas. The color, bright and vibrant. Unlike the rigid perpendicularity of the farmer and his wife, the shapes in these two paintings are far less rigid. We see wiggles and diagonals and multiple free-form non-parallel lines. The seated figures each center their canvas, yet each dynamically interacts with the surrounding space. Instead of depicting the president seated squarely in his chair, the artist has created asymmetry through placing the figure literally on the edge of his seat, suggesting excitement and imminent action. His stance is similarly uneven, one knee pointed toward the viewer, the other relaxed above a playfully rocking foot. While the chair and his suit are traditional, Obama's posture and the background are anything but conventional. The president is positioned in a fantasy field of greenery with no floor or ceiling. Brilliant, colorful flower buds pop up in joyful, abundant surprise here and there. The thick background foliage acts as backdrop, but also seems to overtake him in places, suggesting a connection to his nature and perhaps to the natural world. In the portrait on the right of Michelle Obama, shapes form an orderly, diagonal dynamism. While the sitter is stalwart and solemn, the imaginative shapes on her dress and the casual, yet poised, resting position of her arms suggest an active engagement. Their portraits present a broad range of color while maintaining a weighty sense of importance. President Obama's orange, red, and brown face is emphasized as a focal point in contrast to the green foliage. The colors in the First Lady's portrait are broad but controlled, suggesting both potential and reserve. Through their formal qualities, these two paintings were created to depict an iconoclastic couple. While a straightforward description of the work could read as very simple, the way the form is rendered speaks volumes. These two figures are expressed as original, independent, action-oriented, and free. Through the manner in which the two are represented, we not only understand their physical likeness, but we have information on the spirit underlying these individuals, and perhaps even of the time in which they live. What I hope you get from this visual analysis is a sense of the importance of visual form and how it instructs interpretation. The literal depiction of an image is a small part of the work's value. The power comes from the underlying structure of design elements and principles. Understanding the qualities of formal abstraction is the key to making strong imagery. Once you can define form, you can begin the practice of building your own visual skills. Name the form of what you see and practice interpretation. When you practice visual thinking through looking and making, you become good at it. To understand the way we make meaning from form is helpful to understanding our world. We are daily bombarded by a fire hose of visual information, and we increasingly rely on these visual signs and symbols to navigate. My hope is that this knowledge of the fundamentals of design will inform and expand your pedagogy. We're all visually astute. We've been practicing looking since we first opened our eyes. Adopting visual form as a communication practice can be a powerful way to expand our thinking and to better impact our visual experience. Look well, see well. Discern for yourself that the glitter is indeed gold.